Hey everybody, this is Starjump Grim doing an audio test. Let me know if you can hear me okay in chat. PG says 5 by 5. Thanks, PG. Thanks, Ender. Appreciate it. Be back in 1 second, everyone. All right. Hey everybody, hope you're doing well. Thanks for hanging out today. This is Starjump Shipyard. In case this is the first time you're catching us. Essentially, this show is all about what's flying behind me. Star Citizen ships. Try to focus on that. Obviously, that does lead into gameplay and other discussions because the ships are what plug us into. But still, it is something that we do try to hone in on this show. I try to make this show generally about um, the ships that are upcoming or ships maybe that are out that you want to make purchasing decisions on. Okay, so we're going to get into today's show. Today's show is going to be all about the Endeavor. There's a reason why I'm doing this, but before we get to that, just a quick heads up. I know some of you have been following along with the Argo Capital build. If you haven't seen that on some of the previous streams, Shipyard streams, I think for the last 3 episodes, we've been doing the Argo Capital. I can show that real quick here. Um, again, we're going to keep working on this project. It's just we're going to skip an episode. I can we'll get to this back to this in a day or two, but essentially it has made some progress. Both you're not seeing it here, but both in terms of actuating arms and where the UFO lands and stuff like that. So again, we'll get back to that. It's just not today. But I haven't forgotten about it and everything. And the plan is still that when we get it done, we'll do, I'm going to create a piece of key art with it and we'll make a poster for this made up ship. So Matt Wooding says, saw the word Endeavor in Starjump and dropped everything I was doing. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate that. And thanks for everyone hanging out in chat. I see Starjump Ender in chat as well, my fellow Starjumper. Also, everyone, make sure you stay vigilant. There is some hacking going on a lot of Star Citizen discords. So do not click on links. Be very careful about anyone DMing you, even a possible friend, asking you to test a video game or check something out and it seems off to you. It very likely could be. Make sure you're running your antivirus and anti-malware and all that kind of software. So, and doing regular checks. So why actually, you know what, I'm sorry, before we get into Endeavor, a couple other things. St. Jude coming up starting in April 1st. Me and Ender are starting to work out the schedule for that. I think we have a good idea of where we're going with that schedule and the raffles and all that stuff that are going to be going along to coincide with it. We've got a good kind of, I think, understanding of especially how April is going to work out in terms of the schedule. May is I think we'll play May a little bit by ear, maybe as we see what's doing the best during April. But it's shaping up to be, I think, a really interesting St. Jude Play Live initiative for Starjump for the month of April and May. I think there's going to be a lot of cool content. I know that some of you may be fans of our Fleet Builder show, which was one of our shows we used to do. It's been a while since we've done that. We are going to bring that back for St. Jude. It is kind of the perfect thing to do because it doesn't require a lot of like heavy GPU intensive gameplay and stuff. So we're going to be doing that. We've had a lot of amazing people donate. Hey, GearCon, I see GearCon right there. A lot of amazing people, such as GearCon, supporting the initiative with ships that will be able to be raffled away for donations. But we're going to go more into that later. I just want to remind everybody that that is going on. Leading up to that, you will see Starjump guest appear on several other content creators shows. I know we're going to be on the Yacht Club on March 19th, if I'm not mistaken. And I think I'm going to be on a Beyond the Versed episode. Maybe me and Ender on that one. I have to check in on that actually. But we're looking at some content like that again to get the word out. But it's also just going to be a fun time. We're going to have a lot of fun party games and a lot of just stuff to do. It's going to be a good time. So I think you'll be able to expect it, may be more, maybe less, depending on things, because sometimes work just stresses me and Ender out or whatever. But generally, you probably will get 2 streams from me a week and probably 2 from him, um, on average, I would say. It's not to say that one week might be more or less, but on average, you should look up to that. So you're going to get a lot of Starjump content for those 2 months, is what I'm saying. Okay. Charles says, "Is Starjump a game?" No, Starjump is a content creation group of myself, Starjump Ender, who is in chat, as well as Starlet and VMXEO. I know VMXEO is in chat, I believe. We are just a group that really loves Star Citizen and have built a community up around that, Charles. And we, make kind of unique content. We make the Starjump Fleet Viewer, which is right here. If you've never checked it out, make sure you go check it out. And we have lots of videos over on our YouTube. Make sure you follow our Twitter if you want to keep up with stuff we're doing. So glad to have you here, Charles. Make yourself at home. For the rest of you all, I don't think have any other announcements. Covered the Argo Capital. We are going to get back to that. I am looking at doing a Starjump Station episode this weekend on the title of that show being Now or Later, centered around playing the game for what it is now, or do you play the game for what it will be later, or are you willing to sacrifice now for what the game will be later? And I think there's an interesting discussion to go on with that, especially now that CIG has changed their production focus for this year to focus on the now. You know what I mean? So yeah. Okay. So that being said, Glassword says, "Did Execute get his Discord back?" I do not believe so. Glassword, not yet. So again, be wary, be cautious, be vigilant, be careful out there. That being said, we're going to talk about the MISC Endeavor. Now, for those of you that have followed along the, I'm going to bring something up real quick here. For those of you that have followed along with Starjump Shipyard in the past, you will know that there already is a Starjump Endeavor Shipyard episode. It's currently playing behind me. So you may be asking, why am I doing a revisit episode? And I think the reason I wanted to do this is just sort of something interesting to talk about, is because in prepping for the Starjump Station episode, Now or Later, it really got me to thinking about the the Star System 1.0, which I'm actually currently bringing up. Bear with me. Should have had that folder up. Apologies. It had me thinking about some of that stuff that being talked about in Star Citizen 1.0, specifically the gameplay loops and whatnot. CIG has already come out and said that the Endeavor is going to be a post 1.0 ship. I forget who said that. Maybe someone in chat can remind me, but I'm pretty sure they went ahead and said that's going to be the thing. The Endeavor will be a post 1.0 ship. So Matt Wooding says, easily my most watched and rewatched episode of anything. Well, I appreciate that, Matt. Thank you very much. It was a tricky episode to do, actually. It was a tricky one to do. So, the unique thing about the Endeavor is it really does plug into a lot of different gameplay loops, right? Everything from science and research to to medical gameplay, to scanning gameplay, and a lot of other stuff. Okay, so when you have something that's going to tie into so many gameplay loops, I thought it would be interesting to sort of reevaluate. Is the ship as currently designed appropriate to fit into those gameplay loops, what may need to change, what may need to be revisited. And I'm not coming to this episode with any like hard opinions on it, but more coming to this episode to sort of start a dialogue with you all and see if you know what ideas you have. And I think it could be interesting on some of these episodes that have been pre-recorded of Shipyard. So that would be the Kraken episode, of which we just, you know, we crossed 100,000 views on. It's a big thanks to you all, so appreciate that. But also the Crucible, the Endeavor, Banu Merchantman. Revisiting those episodes now that you know, we're post 1.0 announcement, and seeing if their current concepts still play to what the future of Star Citizen is supposed to be. Okay, so here we go. I do see some discussion regarding the Info Runners Discord. Again, you know, my thing is the last kind of thing I'll say on it. Be cautious. You know, mind your own security. So, all right, we're going to move on though, because this is Starjump. So here we go. Let me pull up a few things here. Okay. So let's pause this video here. We are talking about, let me go back to it here. We're talking about the MISC Endeavor, which you see over here, currently concepted to be 200 meters long. Obviously, that's going to probably change. This ship was concepted before modern metrics were adhered to, and a lot has changed about the metric scales, and specifically, this ship was also, in some ways, especially the Hope class version of this ship, was designed around being able to carry 2 Cutlass Reds. And a lot of people, including me in my Shipyard video, based speculation on the new size of the Endeavor. I sort of used the Cutlass Red, the new version of the Cutlass Red, to sort of get that size speculation going. But even that is not something that necessarily needs to happen anymore. We have smaller dedicated medical ships now. They could refactor the Endeavor to be able to more appropriately hold 2 C8Rs, for example. Or maybe they'll come out with a medical MISC, smaller medical ship that it's meant to fit around. I thought it was always a little weird anyway that it would kind of be, the hangar would have been like situated around 2 Cutlass Reds. So I love when the manufacturers sort of build things to their own line as much as possible. So Full Nelson says, question, could they not treat modules like a big turret or weapon? We can turn power on and off to them now, just add air, whatever else, and set them to not work with tractor beams like the size 3 cops. So that's a great question, Full Nelson, and I think understanding a little bit more what the limitations are behind the modularity. I mean, we do know that modules that are exterior of a ship versus modules that are interior of a ship, we do know there's some differences there. CIG's said as much. However, we do know things such as moving and transformable you know, room spaces, which was a tech blocker on things like the Hull C and stuff, have now been solved for the most part. They've done some modularity solving on the you know, with the Retaliator, so we've seen that. So I don't exactly, you know, what's funny is when you look at the Endeavor, I don't really see too many tech blockers for the ship other than just gameplay blockers, right? Meaning the gameplay is not available for XYZ module. But that still only means the Endeavor technically is held up by gameplay. They could still release some modules and hold other modules back, how they do with certain ships like the Zeus series, how they release 2 variants of it, but 1 variant is held back. They could take that approach with the Endeavor, and if you were to go that approach, there's really nothing holding the Endeavor back. Again, other than just gameplay. Module docking, or being able to hard dock modules to the ship through the vehicle manager, which I really wish they would move that to ASOP terminals, by the way. It's just something I wish CIG would do, because it's always awkward when you like call a ship, on the ASAP terminal, then have to back up, go to your mobiGlass, pull up the vehicle loadout manager, then go back to the ASAP terminal, bring the ship up. It's just pretty clunky. So Mark G, I see you say after power rework, overclocking seems to have gone by the wayside. I think that overclocking is going to turn more into item levels. I think what that's going to come into. So overclocking will essentially be upgrading item levels. So I think that the parallel's still there. So anyways, what I wanted to do here though, real quick, was just take a look at and by the way, everyone, this won't be a real long episode today, but I do appreciate you all hanging out with me. But I want to take a look at the current kind of large industry, science-based, general purpose-based design language going on with MISC. Now, one thing I didn't include here was the oh, actually, I could probably add one more ship to this. I didn't add the whole series because I do think CIG takes a little bit of a different approach with those. I think the design language of those ships actually would not be done that way now. Okay, so let's reposition a couple of these. And then we have our Endeavor. Okay, let's lock our canvas. So the Endeavor is an old concept, like I was saying. If you go back to, again, my video that I was showing just a little bit ago, I'll bring it up here. You can look at some of those old original concepts here. For the Endeavor, some of them I really like, actually. This one's just kind of a giant space station. Obviously, they moved away from that. That reminds me of the ship from Sunshine, which is one of my favorite movies. But anyways, the Endeavor, the funny thing about it is it's really kind of held on to its look, even from the very earliest days of its concepting. And essentially what it is it's got the front part of the ship here, right? And it's got the long superstructure, and then it's got the engine bay. Okay, and I call those out later on through here. Let's watch from here. I'm gonna have the sound off. But the ship is essentially made up of three sections. One is sort of habitation and living and ship controls and all that good stuff. The other one is a superstructure, essentially just a long hallway with airlocks that connects all the modules. And then lastly, that leads down to an engine, sort of an engine section, right? This is essentially what those are called. So we have the Explorer cab, we have the workshop, and then the drive section. Again, the workshop you can just consider as a superstructure connecting bridge to all the modules. Now, again, this is old concept stuff here, everyone. This can and definitely will change, okay? The interesting thing about this too is that the Explorer cab can disconnect from the workshop module or the workshop truss. When it does disconnect, it becomes its own ship. It is allowed to fly around stuff. The last thing I remember checking, it does not have a jump drive, so it can't go through jump points, but it can QT around. I believe that is accurate information. If I'm wrong on that, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure that's accurate. So much like the Crucible or any ship like that, of which there may be only the Crucible, where it can leave part of itself behind, you can venture off and do something and then come back to the rest of your ship, reconnect, and be on your way. Pretty sure, is it just the Endeavor and Crucible? Chat, feel free to let me know on that. Alex Meekleod says, "Are you going to put in Bengal variants from Squadron 42 into Shipyard?" I assume you mean Fleet Viewer. Yeah, we'll put all the Squadron 42 stuff in there once that game is out. Even if I had access to the models, which I don't, even if I did have access to them, CIG would ask me to remove them. So, again, I think that knowing how this works, I think CIG will probably keep the overall feel of this, meaning it's got a front section, a middle section, and a rear section. But what I think will very possibly happen is they could combine and keep everything into a single ship, and not have so many disconnecting parts and pieces. And what I mean by that is I could see them in some sort of reconcepting, putting a medium landing pad integrated in here somewhere. Maybe it's integrated in the Explorer cab, maybe it's in the engine cab, or maybe again it's integrated somewhere in the superstructure, but I could see them integrating something in there. They're still going to have to release all the modules because unfortunately they have or not, or fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, they have sold those, so those will have to come out as modules. If you haven't seen the modules for that, I can show you those now. Did I have where's my master set? There we go. There we go. Okay, let me move over. So here's all the modules that are available for the Endeavor. Those of you that know the Endeavor well will know this. There are supply modules, there are habitation modules, general research, research modules, or science modules. There are hangar modules, hospital wing, farming, agricultural, and probably like ranching modules. I do think these Olympic-based modules will be able to do both ultimately. Norse Peak, glad you just noticed, appreciate it. And then obviously a telescope module for scanning. So these are the modules, and they've sold all these separately. They've sold the master set is so it's very possible they have to make these, of course, but it's very possible that some of these modules will change. Again, I think small changes are okay. There's going to be those people that sort of that don't love the fact that CIG will change something after the fact, but some of these things are going to have to update. Okay. But also what I think we can look at is some of the design cues here from the Starlancer, the Odyssey, and the Expanse, and transfer those over to the Endeavor in some sort of way to sort of create kind of a new concept for it. And that is something, by the way, we're going to do as we get closer to St. Jude. We're going to be possibly doing something with the Endeavor for St. Jude. More on that later. But what I think you could see carrying over are some parts and pieces from how different ships are structured. The ship that I think will have most influence on the Endeavor, I think, will be the Starlancer. And here's the funny thing. A lot of people originally went, well, the Odyssey at 140 meters, do we have that right? I thought the Odyssey was bigger than 140. I need to look at that. I need to reconfirm that. But a lot of people took the Odyssey and went, well, it'll obviously be what the Endeavor is based off. So that's going to mean the Endeavor scales up to a huge size, probably like 400 meters long. The more I've checked out the Starlancer Max, I actually don't think that's necessary. In many ways, actually, I think the Starlancer Max front section could be the Endeavor front section. But what they would do is essentially remove everything from about turret back and create essentially a place for the truss to connect to, the big workshop truss, and then the rest of the ship would sit at that scale. Now, I do think for your modules to fit, the truss is going to have to get longer. So I do think, again, I do think this will get bigger than 200 meters. But I don't think it needs to be. I'm not one of those people that thinks that this ship needs to be 500 meters long or 400 meters long. I have done some scale estimates with this. Now, again, I want to caveat that. Where is it? Let's look at scale here. Again, you can mess with the scale quite a bit. It can get ridiculous. But what's more likely is that the ship is going to obviously not grow larger than the Javelin. I'm pretty certain CIG is not going to do that. So let's start thinking about how much this would have to grow in order to fit. I'm trying to, hopefully this part comes up. Okay. They originally said that the ship would hold 2 Cutlass Reds. We'll let it play from here. Yeah. Mink, Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Give the channel a follow. Appreciate that. They originally said that the Endeavor will be able to carry 2 Cutlass Reds. Okay. Now, thank you, Meek. Appreciate that. Salute to you. Really appreciate the support. Obviously, when the original concept for the Endeavor was made, the Cutlass Red was a smaller ship. Okay, remember, the Cutlass has already had a redo. So with the Cutlass was a smaller ship, you could get probably 2 Cutlass Reds into the 200-meter Endeavor hangar. Okay, that obviously is not going to occur anymore now that the Cutlass has grown to, I think it's 38 meters long. Correct me, Chad, if I'm wrong on that, but I believe it's 38 meters long. So what does that mean? Well, let's see here. I think I slide over to it here in a second. Again, the original Cutlass Red is right here, 29 meters long. The new one is that big, okay, 36 meters long. So those of you that are newer to Star Citizen, the original Cutlass was a much smaller ship by a significant amount, okay? And again, there are ships that were designed around this. Same thing with the Crucible. The Crucible was designed around the original Hornet scale. That has changed, and the Crucible will have to adjust accordingly. So let's keep going here. Okay, so you'll see right here, if you try to take a Cutlass Red, a current metric Cutlass Red, and try to slide it into the 200-meter hangar, it absolutely will not fit, right? That's pretty clear. So if you were to then take the Cutlass and scale it up to where 2 Cutlass Reds could fit in that hangar, right? And give them a little bit of room to move around, because they need to have a little bit of maneuvering room, right? That's something a lot of people forget. Again, this hangar is the original concept. I do think the hangar is going to be massively reconcept. We'll get to that in here in just a minute. But to be able to fit 2 in there, as you see here, with not much room to spare, which is not how CIG would do it, that means your Endeavor has to grow to a significantly larger size. Again, this is if you don't change any of the current ship's concept design, right? Now you could switch that up a little bit by putting in a hangar that is a complete fly-through hangar like this. So very similar to like what's on the Idris, a hangar that you can come in the back, lead the front, whatever. By doing that, you single file your Cutlasses, so you're going to be able to fit them in there a lot more easily. Down Bad, thank you for the follow, appreciate that. Salute to you. That gives you a little bit more leeway in terms of the size ships you can bring in. You can even bring in like an Apollo, as you just saw right there. But as VMXEO just said, we've got more options for medical ships now. We've got the C8R, we've got the Terrapin Medical. So they could be designed around that. Payne and hey, good morning to you. I hope you're well. So it could be lengthened, right? But even if it's lengthened, it's going to have to deal with a size increase, right? And I think, do I go over that here? Let me see if I do. Do I do that? I thought I did. Bear with me, everyone. Can't remember if I do. Again, we're bringing up. No, okay, I guess I didn't go over it. Okay. Go here. I want to pause it here. Okay. So regardless, the Endeavor will grow. I just don't think it needs to grow quite as much as people are assuming, right? Again, going back to here, if we were to take our Starlancer Max and you remove the engineering and cargo ramp section in the rear, it pretty much is the same size as the Endeavor front end. Again, I think you'd have to lengthen the workshop module to get your different modules in there, including maybe a larger or longer hangar. And then the engine section could be as big as it needs to be from a design standpoint. But what I think you'll see them do is borrow a lot of things off the Odyssey and whatnot, like engines and stuff like that. So these little side-mounted engines over here on the Odyssey, I think you'll actually see those more on the sides. Maybe we can do a kit bash of that soon. That'd be pretty cool. VMXEO says, will it get fatter after all? I think so. But again, remember looks can be pretty deceiving sometimes, right? So even at 200 meters long, it's somewhat hard to understand how big a ship is at 200 meters until it's sitting in front of you. I think we've all seen that with like the Endeavor, or sorry, the Idris and the Javelin. It kind of looks small from a distance, and then you get up to it and you're like, oh my God, this gun is bigger than my entire ship, you know? So again, it's all about how CIG utilizes interior space, and that's the other key thing. As you've seen with the Polaris, as you've seen with the Idris and other ships, CIG is getting better and better with utilizing every bit of interior space possible. So it's going to come down to how they utilize that space. Now, another thing to sort of look at is the Pioneer. So the Pioneer was reconcepted around current gameplay, right? And the Pioneer changed pretty significantly. However, what occurred with the Pioneer is CIG knew it was going to be a massive reconcepting, and some people weren't going to like that. So, in my opinion, what they did is they sweetened the pot a little bit. They reconcepted it, but they also said, hey, since we're reconcepting it, we're going to also add things that it didn't have before, right? So it added the integrated ground extractors. It put the fabrication systems in there. The fact that it can now build ships and vehicles, again, was not part of the plan. If you look at the top down of the Pioneer, and I'm just going to bring that up real quick because I think it's kind of important to look at, especially in reference to this ship. Bear with me. If you look at the top down of this, all right, where it is, here's the main thing. There was another image showing the bridge, but even discounting the bridge, two things are going on here. One, there's a lot more unused space here on this ship that they can utilize, and I think you will see that utilization. I think that'll come in the form of a medical room and some other nice to haves. But if you look, this ship was always thought of as being a base building ship, right? That's the whole point behind it. But its extra large drones are right here. That is how much of the ship is actually taken up. Well, and actually this control area here, this is how much of the Pioneer is actually taken up by its base building mechanics. Think about that for a minute. That's kind of amazing, right? That entire ship that originally would transform in order to build bases now, for the most part, utilizes this area and this area, the cargo area. That's what it builds bases with. You know what I mean? So again, what they decided to do then was go back and add a bunch more stuff to this ship. So they added fabrication units up here, of which I think there's technically 4 of them. So added fabrication units up here. It added an internal hangar, which it didn't have before, an internal medium-sized hangar. This originally was just an external landing pad, but now it's a full internal hangar. And then they added the manufacturing hangar right here, right? So again, they've added stuff to all this, right? So when you look at the Endeavor and you say, well, what could they add, or what could they add to this to sort of sweeten the pot on any sort of major redesign? I think you can look at those as tying into manufacturing or whatever those new primary gameplay loops that are important to CIG now. So let's take a look at 2 of them, right? Fabrication and base building. One of the things we don't have for this ship is any sort of base building or manufacturing module. That is not something they ever outlined for this. But another point to remember about the Endeavor is it doesn't land. Last I checked, unless they change this in the concepting, or when it's reconcepted, the Endeavor is spaceborne, like at all times, very much like the Javelin, right? It is in space. So, but what type of base building could this do? Well, it could be an alternate ship to build the supply module to build the supply bay that in turn builds space stations. Right now, that is locked behind the Pioneer, and I do think that's how it will stay for the time being, especially for 1.0. The Pioneer will be the ship that you build space stations with. Nothing wrong with that. We know that the Endeavor is a post 1.0 ship, so it kind of comes down to that. They'll eventually need to bring another ship in that can build the supply bay, because people want options, right? People do want options. I think the Endeavor would be a perfect ship to get a module that supports building the supply bay. And that's what it does. And it builds a supply bay, and then obviously the supply bay goes on and builds the space station for us. Again, I think that's just one. Another one. We know that the telescope module and the research modules on the Endeavor go into, lead heavily into scanning for interesting areas, to go out and possibly, so for example, the whole scanning suite, the telescope suite, maybe the Endeavor will be able to forward scan into other system-wide scans of an entire system. So let's say it comes into Nix. It can scan the entire system of Nix, zoom in on planets. Okay, and so instead of flying to a planet and scanning it from orbit, imagine being able to be parked anywhere in the system using that telescope array to zoom in on a planet, scan it from a distance, find the best place to build a base. Okay, from the safety of being not directly above the planet, right? I mean, that'd be pretty powerful, pretty powerful advantage, right? Especially if there's a new system that comes out and there's a little bit of a land rush on it. You can just get into the system and immediately start scanning. So I think that'd be cool. There may be, so for example, the Pioneer is the only way we can build those extra large bases and space station, right? Well, maybe because this ship has the telescope array, which is unique. It also has the research module, that big research, and actually I think this might be it here. Science module, research module. Maybe the Pioneer, or sorry, maybe the Endeavor is the only ship that can scan to the level of fidelity that its telescope array can scan to. Maybe no other ship can scan to that level, but also maybe the research and and remember how blueprints are going to be affected by research, right? We research the blueprints in order to upgrade them and all that stuff. Maybe the Endeavor is what we need, and its research modules are what we need in order to get up to those, tier 5 blueprints, right? The tier 5 quality blueprints, whether it's building a ship. So let's say if you wanted to manufacture a Anvil Paladin, right? You're going to manufacture it at your fabrication hangar. Maybe you need an Endeavor to be able to research that blueprint to bring it up to a tier 5, right? Which we all know will be something you can do. Again, I'm speculating here, and Mark G, I appreciate that. Hopefully, the way I look at the Shipyard streams is they're not to convince you to buy a ship. They're just to give you information that you can use in making a decision, right? We are in speculation territory right now with the Endeavor. Here's what we do know, though. We do know the Endeavor must change to fit the current game. Okay. I'm going to bring up real quick. Which one is it here? Is it this one? Yes. This is kind of the gameplay loops. These are the guilds and the gameplay loops, right? So let's look at the council, which they deal with, it looks like they sort of deal with everything from racing to bounty hunting, and combat related stuff, right? There's nothing to say that there couldn't be a racing support module for the Endeavor, right? For space-based races. Don't know. Maybe it's something. There definitely could be a module for the Endeavor that is centered around combat. For those of you that look at that and go, well, the Endeavor is not a combat ship. If you go back to its original concept jump point issue. So the original jump point issue, which I don't have a link to, sadly, there's a jump point issue from right around the time the ship was revealed originally. And if you go back and read through that, they go really in depth on the concept development of the Endeavor. One of the things they mention multiple times is a combat module. Okay. So put aside if you agree it should have that or not. They do talk about a combat module, a module that's got turrets on it and weapon platforms and all that stuff. Okay. So maybe the Endeavor goes that way. They could take it that way, right? We have the Imperial Sports Federation, racing driver, racing pilot, that kind of stuff. Parkour athlete. I thought this was kind of interesting. So that could mean that they're bringing some of that SATA ball stuff in. What if there was an Endeavor module that was literally a sports arena where you can do SATA ball and other events on there, right? Crazy, I know. We're in far speculation mode here. but I think that could be kind of cool, right? I mean, I think it's wild the CIG is even considering this a guild at all. So the fact that I mean, not racing, I get the ship racing stuff's important, but things like the athletic stuff is incredible to me that they would go this route. So I could see that. North End Trooper says, and the PTV racetrack module. Absolutely. It could be something like that. I mean, the Endeavor could be big enough to support stuff like that. I think it probably would make more sense for an FPS type parkour thing or some sort of saddle ball thing, but you never know. And especially because saddle ball's 0G, it's a 0G activity. You could have the module on the Endeavor be 0G, right? And be in space. It could be really cool. Academy of Sciences, right? Hunter, farmer, crafter, research. So we know that the ship is going to play very heavily into this, right? So farmer, obviously the ship has the Olympic modules, right? The big dome modules. That's going to, yes, Northspeak, very much like Ender's Game. So we know you're going to be able to farm on the Endeavor. When CIG was going over base building, one of the things they mentioned at CitizenCon was being able to be a rancher. So you're going to be able to have herds of quasi grazers and stuff and feed and keep and stuff. Very possible that the Endeavor will get modules or the Olympic module will do this, but you're going to be able to do ranching on the Endeavor, I would think. Speculation, but I would think. We know it's going to do research. We know it's going to do exploration through its telescope scanning abilities. And again, remember everyone, I think exploration gameplay loop is going to be primarily centered around scanning and information gathering through scanning. I think there'll be other aspects to it, but I think that is kind of the loop of exploring in Star Citizen. Okay. I really do. So again, it ties in pretty heavily here, and I think there's other areas. Did CIG spell this wrong? Crafter? Is that supposed to be crafter? They may have spelled that wrong. We need to ask CIG what is crafter. I think that's crafter. But again, we know the Endeavor is going to hook into this. Okay, the Endeavor already 100% does research, so it's going to research those blueprints, which almost guarantees there's going to be a fabrication module for the Endeavor, or one of its existing modules is going to have crafting stations on it. Much like if I go back to our, go back to that Pioneer image, much like our Pioneer and the crafting stations it has right here. You're going to have these on the Endeavor. It's almost impossible for it not to. Okay. VM says copywriter did not make it into the universe of profession. Yeah, it's true. It's true. Continuing on though, mercenary gear, soldier FPS, bounty hunter, combat pilot, operator. So again, the Endeavor has the hangar module, so it will be able to support combat operations to some degree, just as a general hangar landing spot. Again, that could be a little bit of a reach, but what I do think you could see is a module centered around bounty hunting. With cryostasis pods or what have you, brig, all that. So there could be I could actually see some sort of bounty hunting module that has a few different things on it, right? So it's cryostasis pods, or the stasis pods, however you refer to them, a brig section, all that kind of stuff. I could totally see that. Chipas says, Mr. Grimm, where might there be a hot tub? It could be a hot tub module. Could be a hot tub module, yeah. Beerman on YouTube says, so 1.0 release, what's your guess, guys? I'm pretty sure this is post 1.0 released. CIG has even said that the Endeavor is post 1.0. Yeah. Interstellar Transport Guild, trader, transporter, recovery expert, hauler, courier. Right now, the Endeavor does have a module situated around carrying some additional supplies. I think it's called a supply module, if I'm not mistaken. I see there being a cargo module for the Endeavor. There's going to be a full-on cargo module, and I think that cargo module could borrow. I'm gonna switch us back over here real quick to bear with me, everybody. I think that module could be based off the Hull series, right? So imagine if you had the the arms, the cargo arms on the hull C. Imagine if you had a module that stuck out here with the Endeavor that allowed it to carry a certain level of cargo, right? So I could see it tying into that. Again, the modules they have for it now are great, but when you look at the trades that are going on and what are going to be important, I see there being a lot more room to revise and or expand the module set for the Endeavor for more useful modules. One of the modules, for example, Finite, appreciate that. Thank you so much for the follow. Appreciate that. One of the modules for the Endeavor is a fuel module to give it more fuel. But maybe they could turn that into more of an exploration module that has additional fuel supplies, but also enhanced scanning abilities, whatever you want to do. Yes, appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. Obviously, last but not least, United Resource Workers, right? So this goes into repair, engineering, fuel gathering, salvage, mining, builder, refiner, crafter. Okay, we already kind of established this ship's definitely getting fabrication units on board, 100%. Don't know how big they are, but it definitely will. Definitely will. But I could see it also getting a refinery module, okay, which would tie into mining, would tie into salvager. I think CIG ultimately, and we'll see how they net out with this on ships like the Pioneer, the Kraken to some degree, the Orion, on these bigger industrial ships. And when they redo the Reclaimer, when they do a pass on the Reclaimer, which is, I have heard, is happening. Not happening right this second, but CIG is planning on doing a big pass on the Reclaimer. Big industrial ships, I do think they're going to look at other ways for them to tie into things and support multiple professions. So I could see the Endeavor getting some sort of refinery module. That way it can support salvage and mining operations, right? You tie that together, the refinery module, you tie that together with a landing hangar, a hangar module, where mining and salvage ships can come, land on the Endeavor, and send their stuff over to be refined on the Endeavor, and then cargo ships could come, grab that refined material off. I think it'd be pretty amazing. Again, we're talking about redesigning major parts of the Endeavor, though, right? And we'll get into that here in a minute. Crixus says the Kraken and BMM will be out first once the gameplay loop is in. Yep, exactly. Again, I've heard from very good sources that Ben and John really want to get the Kraken done. They're excited for it. So I think we'll get the Ironclad first. And then I actually do think once the Ironclad is done, they may start moving into production on the Kraken. Maybe. I'm speculating, but maybe. Yeah, Northspeak says the Odyssey already has a refinery. Exactly. So it wouldn't be such a stretch to put a refinery module in to the Endeavor, or much like you're saying, Northspeak, they could just keep that on the Odyssey and make it to where you have to work together with an Odyssey or an Expanse. Remember the Expanse? Don't forget the Expanse. It's a refinery ship, although small scale. Again, looking for that kind of that synergy amongst its ships. But again, it's possible they could bring in something like a salvage or a mining module into the Endeavor. I personally don't think they're going to do that because I think they already have capital size ships to service those professions, the Reclaimer and the Orion. I don't think we necessarily need the Endeavor to play in that playground, but I think if it just supported those efforts in some way would be really cool. Sad Plus says, what do we think the odds are the Kraken having a refinery module as part of the Kraken's replacement for the Dragonfly blade? Well, so I really do hope they rethink the Kraken's Dragonfly Bay. Personally, I would like it just to be like an internal hangar for a cutter. But if they wanted to change it into something like a gas collector and refinery thing for the Kraken, since it's supposed to be a long distance ship, I think I would be equally fine with. I just think the Dragonfly Bay on it is one of the least useful things. I really do. Yes, North End. There's a bunch of other modules I didn't list off that I think would be equally cool. A commerce module could be a storefront module where you can sell things. Obviously, the CIG's talked a lot about that and how we're going to be able to maglock items and all that, right? but there could be some sort of data holding module, right? I think that would tie into this to the telescope module, the telescope array, because its entire point is to scan, and you got to put that data somewhere. So it could be that. I would think that the telescope module has a bunch of computer bays on it, and those computer bays will have blades in them, and you're gonna be able to store data on that. By the way, everyone, if you're thinking about starting Star Citizen, you want to jump in, try it out. This is the year that the game is going to get much more playable. Use my referral code. You see it right there. I appreciate it. You can also, if you want to start a Star Citizen account, you can go to this link right here. And you can use that link to start an account, and we'll both get the referral for that. So appreciate it. This here. All right, let's see. Okay. Hunter D says could have a mobile prison module, private security. Yeah, again, that could play right into that that sort of bounty hunting thing, right? Okay, let's see here. Bear with me, everybody. Bear with me. Minutia, no. I guess you can't because you can't post links. I guess you could put your code in, but you should start content and better spread your stuff. Anyways, any other thoughts on the Endeavor? Again, I think it's just interesting to revisit these ships sometimes and look at what professions in this entire, what professions they could tie into, and what not only what professions they could tie into, but how CIG may need to reconfigure some of those modules so that they more better service those gameplay professions, right? Which CIG is starting to understand a lot more. I don't know how long the whole blueprint the blueprint thing was like part of the original vision, but obviously it's going to be a major point going forward. So I could see some things changing around that. Originally it was sort of based off this grid system. I could see that changing a little bit. We'll see how this works. I think it's very possible they did a reconcept on the Endeavor already. Not anything super in depth, but I see them maybe have created a little bit of new artwork and stuff supported by some of the new designs. That's very possible. I'm probably speculating on that a little too much, but I think it's possible they did some reconcepting already when they had people working out, like Gavin Rothery and stuff, working out things on the Odyssey and the Expanse and later the Starfarer and stuff like that. So, yeah, Norse, I think they'll have to change that grid system a little bit. I do think they will. Red Samurai, salute to you. I hope you're well. North End Trooper says, how much of the space stations will take away from the Endeavor, or when the Endeavor will take away from the space stations when it comes out? I don't know. I mean, I think that the benefit of things like the Endeavor is that it's mobile, right? You can take it anywhere. They also said that the Kraken was essentially a mobile space station. They've said that multiple times. And you could ask the same question about that. But again, I think the benefit there is that it can travel, can move, right? Lady Space Patrol says, what would the huge dish be for anymore? Scanning. We do know scanning gameplay is something that we're still getting another version of. CIG's already stated that scanning is going to be a big part of Star Citizen, not only for finding resources and building bases, but also other factors. And I think that telescope array is going to allow you to scan from much further distances. What I hope, Lady Space Patrol, is that it's a system-wide scan, where any other scanning you really need to be like flying above the surface or maybe from orbit. I'm hoping the Endeavor can scan like across a system. So let's say you're parked over by Daymar, you can still go scan a moon of ArcCorp, right? We'll see. North Speak says, my Pioneer is a mobile space station. Well, that's kind of the point, is that a lot of the capital ships in game, CIG said this with all of them, a lot of the capital ships in the game really are centered around being kind of a mobile space station, right? That's something that CIG has not been super super mysterious about. They do look at those as being very much mobile space stations, and have said as much. So real quick, everyone, I'm posting in chat a link to my Endeavor video if you want to go back and watch the full thing. I still think it's one of the better ship analysis done on the Endeavor. Not to toot my own horn, but I do think it's one of the best and most thorough. The only thing I will say is I apologize. There are Predator mounts advertising. Back when we did this video, we were sponsored by Predator mounts. They are no longer around anymore. Do not use their services. Do not go to their website and try to make any purchases. Those of you that have been following that fiasco know that that's gone really bad in the future Starjump. And I'm sure I can speak for Ender here if he's still in chat. Starjump will be a lot more careful about who we partner with for future sponsorships and stuff like that. Again, we thought the Predator mounts thing was going to work out well for us, and it did for a time until it did not. So sorry about that. These videos have that tagging on them, but please just ignore that. Watch it for the content. Let's see here. Anything else? Do you think the Odyssey is necessary to have if you already have the Endeavor? No, but I think it's going to be a long ass time before you fly the Endeavor. So I think the Odyssey you're going to get in your hands much sooner if that matters to you. If that matters to you. Everyone, I told you it would be a little bit of a quick stream today, and it is because, again, sometimes reality hits and you just have to work, which I do work. I do this during my lunch break. We will be continuing the Argo Capital build. I have already done some changes to it that I think you all are going to be really excited for. I've started doing actuation on the arms. I've started creating a better place for for the UFO to land, all that kind of good stuff. So good stuff. I hope you all have been enjoying that. That's been a little bit of a different sort of stream, and XQ's been joining for some of those. I think that's going to be something that turns out really cool. And again, it's sort of an exercise to build up to another project that we're going to do during St. Jude. Okay. All right, everyone. I'm going to send you over to Meyer. Please give him a little bit of that Starjump love. Thanks for coming and hanging out for a little bit with me today. I really appreciate it, as always. Again, stick around, give him Starjump love. I will talk to you all real soon. Have a great rest of your week. I'll do that Argo Capital stream later, and also we'll be doing Starjump Shipyard this Friday. Okay, this Friday night, Starjump Shipyard, now or later. Okay, you get to see me and Ender talk about Star Citizen if he's available. All right, talk to you all later. Have a good night.
Everything else.